everything that has been announced is really cruel and barbaric, and it's going to put even more disabled people into poverty. The issue here isn't that disabled people are lazy. The issue here isn't that disabled people don't want to work or can't work. Many do and can. The issue is there aren't meaningful jobs available. People are talking about taking their own lives because people cannot see a way out. This is our last chance now, because if not, the only option then for disabled people is, if you can't work, your life is probably going to be lived in poverty. And if the assisted dying bill gets pushed through, then that would probably be an option for people as well. And I say this, not lightly. I'm saying it, it scares me.
Dr Shani Dhanda, welcome to PoliticsJOE. We've just heard the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions present her Green Paper on welfare reform, which she describes as a pathway to work. What was your first reaction to hearing her reform plan?
I think everything that has been announced is really cruel and barbaric, and it's going to put even more disabled people into poverty. Cutting people's support that they desperately need is not going to magically create jobs.
Over the past week, the media has been briefed that PIP payments, that's the personal independence payment, which is in place to help with the additional costs of having a disability, would be frozen. It wouldn't rise with inflation anymore. But today, Liz Kendall confirmed that it wouldn't be frozen, despite ministers defending the need to cut the welfare bill all weekend. What was the anxiety like of not knowing or thinking that this lifeline could be removed for people in the run-up to today?
A lot of disabled people have contacted me. I'm a disabled person myself. People are talking about taking their own lives because people cannot see a way out. Because what you have to understand is it's a vicious cycle. If you're unable to work, the only option is to rely on welfare support, but it doesn't go far enough, because on average, disabled people face unavoidable extra costs of over £1,000 a month. If you are eligible for PIP, it's less than £200 a week. So the support that people are getting already isn't enough. It already doesn't touch the sides of these unavoidable extra costs. So can you imagine the stress, the anxiety that it's been causing for people to now learn they may not even be eligible anymore, or that they may be getting less? And that's why it is so barbaric, and people are just going to be put into poverty. But in the long run, it's going to cost more. It is going to cost the taxpayer more.
You mentioned there about eligibility and how the Secretary of State announced that there was going to be a change in criteria to qualify for personal independence payment. Specifically, she said, you'll now need 4 points in one activity to qualify for the daily living element of PIP. What does that mean for people in practice?
It means that so many people that need this support will no longer be eligible, but they'll still be living with their health conditions and impairments and struggling. And then you've got to think about also, the government say they want more disabled people in work. Well, if people can't manage their own health condition, they're never going to be able to get in work, are they? The assessment at the moment for things like PIP is already unfit for purpose. They're just making it even worse.
It's expected that change to eligibility will affect about 1 million people, with only those with the most severe disabilities now qualifying. Who's going to fall through the gaps?
I think what we have to understand is disability isn't just a medical issue. A lot of people face disability because there are barriers in society and bias. At the age of 16, I didn't get a job interview until I removed any mention of my disability from my application, and that was after applying for over 100 jobs. So, I have to spend thousands and thousands of pounds every year to travel by taxi because public transport, the tube, is not accessible. So in reality, I shouldn't have to face these extra costs. I shouldn't have to live with this bias. So there are ways to help disabled people spend less, and that's where the government need to put their focus. So it's hard to answer that question because so many disabled people in so many different ways are going to be impacted.
Are the government, like you said, with accessibility, are they putting the cart before the horse? Because these reforms are meant to support people back to work, but are there enough accessible jobs right now for people with disabilities?
Yeah, and look, this is why I think what the government is doing is so barbaric, because if they wanted to help get disabled people in work, why aren't they starting there? Why aren't they starting with employers? I was on the government's job site yesterday to find a job, and there are only, well, yesterday there were only 137 full-time remote jobs with an employer that consider themselves to be disability confident. So that's the government scheme. So let's just do the maths. 137 fully remote jobs, which by the way, some of them weren't. They were like, you've got to come in the office once a week. You must be able to drive and do this and this. But then when you click to see how many are part-time, it went down to 8 in the whole country. The issue here isn't that disabled people are lazy. The issue here isn't that disabled people don't want to work or can't work. Many do and can. The issue is there aren't meaningful jobs available. But I also have to hold space for the fact that, of course, there will be some disabled people that won't be able to work, but that isn't their choice. That is because they have a health condition that prevents them from doing so, but they still should be able to live a life of dignity with access to the care and resources that they need.
For those people that you mentioned that simply just aren't able to work, the universal credit health element, new claimants will receive a reduced rate, which amounts to a £2,500 cut per year for that person. What would that mean for their access to things like dignity that you just mentioned?
I think it's really important to understand that disabled people live in huge high rates of poverty. We know that nearly half of everyone in the UK that lives in poverty is either a disabled person or they're a carer of a disabled person. Only last week, the Trussell Trust said that 75% of their food bank community were from disabled households. Disabled people don't need more cuts right now. We need more support, which is why the government know they will be putting more people into poverty and destitution. I don't understand why they don't realize that in the long run, this is only going to cost them more money.
Do you view this green paper as welfare reform or as a cost-cutting exercise from the government?
Yeah, it's nothing but a very cruel cost-cutting exercise, and honestly, it's indefensible. I really hope that when it comes to the vote for MPs, that they vote against it. This is our last chance now, because if not, the only option then for disabled people is if you can't work, your life is probably going to be lived in poverty. And if the assisted dying bill gets pushed through, then that would probably be an option for people as well. And I say this, not lightly. I'm saying it scares me.
Could I ask you specifically about young people? Because one of the standout lines from Kendall's address today was that young people won't be able to claim incapacity benefits. The age at which you claim PIP will be raised to 18, and the universal credit health element will be delayed until the age of 22. What is the rationale behind that?
I don't know. What does she think? That only adults experience disability? That isn't the case. Like we know at the moment, we have a crisis of so many young people that are facing, huge rates of mental health, and we know why. And people are sitting there scratching their heads, and they're like, "Oh, why is this?" The writing's on the wall. It's pretty obvious. And again, I think that's why this makes it all so cruel, because we know why things are happening. You know, we can't ignore the fact that disability is it's a human experience. We should expect it. We're living longer as a society. We're developing chronic health conditions at a much younger age. The way in which we have to live, the cost of living, it's harder to get a job. Wages aren't matching the rate of inflation. Everything is harder. Of course, this is going to affect all of us, but especially disabled people.
Is there anything in the Green Paper, any reform that you welcome? And if not, what are the sort of reforms that you would like to see?
I think this was a real missed opportunity for the government, and I think their whole approach has been wrong. And leaking it so many days in advance, that was deliberate, and that was deliberate to stir up anxiety, stress. Um, is the whole way in which they've gone about it is awful. I do think it's been a massive missed opportunity to get more disabled people in work. And if they did do that, if they helped to close the disability employment gap, we would have 50 billion more annually every year in our budget. Why haven't they done why haven't they done something that could have been more long-term and sustainable and would have genuinely supported disabled people and would have been something that we would have genuinely welcomed as a community? Because life on benefits is no party. It's not what everybody is making it out to be. I know I wouldn't want to only have to live on less than £200 a week. I wouldn't be able to. If that was my reality, I wouldn't be able to work because I have to spend more than that on taxes to get to work, and there's also a massive misconception, especially with small business owners, that I think it's really expensive to employ disabled people. But again, that's not the case. So much research that tells us the average cost of a workplace adjustment is £75. And the government have a grant, it's a scheme called Access to Work. The government will pay for someone's workplace adjustment. So this is good. This is what I would love to have seen to be reformed today. We need more investment in that because less than 1% of working age disabled people are currently claiming any access to work support. So I would have loved to have seen more involvement of disabled people and our organisations because we know the answers. This is our lived experience. I work with businesses day in, day out on disability inclusion. We know the answers. The government don't. It's non-disabled people making these decisions. So yeah, massive missed opportunity yet again.
Dr. Shani Dhanda, thank you so much for your time.